If you're familiar with designing 3D models, it is almost guaranteed you've made one or two models that toe the line of poorly optimized and downright illegal. There's no shame in it. Personally, I think it's fun to hit the subdivide button as quickly as possible on high poly assets, email the results to various Valve employees, and post it to the Blender subreddit asking for tips. But even more than that, I enjoy seeing the downright horrendous models that have actually been released to the public in real products. Not all terrible models are alike, however. They differ quite heavily in both density and importance in the topology hell mythos. There are layers to this. Not quite like an iceberg, as some might be ready to say, but more like a food chain. A live environment filled with a diverse ecosystem and created by people with backs shaped like shrimp. Today I'd like to take you on a wildlife expedition into this thriving ecosystem. Within this environment there are three tiers which I have classified with this high quality graphic design. We have bottom feeders, hunters, and mid-level prey, and at the top are Hollywood producers. Within these groups there are both subsections and exceptions, but for all intents and purposes, this will be our core chart for which we will judge the specimens we are about to examine.
This is very interesting.
Is this chart arbitrary? Yes. Did I make it up on the spot to try and give this video a fun theme? Yes. Will it add educational value to your understanding of this video? At the bottom of this development food chain would be games like Hunt Down the Freeman, which counts as a video game in the same way those guys who open carry and call you a civilian count as real police officers. This shameless plundering of a beloved game's brand, assets, and characters has its own absurd development lore, including wage theft, account botting, and a full hostile takeover by the development team. In doing so, both trying to fix the game and taunting the creator while doing it. An insane power move if you ask me. The game itself doesn't have that many interesting models, mainly because it just pilfers them all from better titles. But there is one of note. This cone with extremely dense topology for some reason. From this image we can tell its P count is extremely large for seemingly no reason, but it isn't on the same level as the more egregious offenders. It seemingly is bad enough that the aforementioned developers who stole a whole project from its creator made an achievement making fun of it after the fact. But I can't seem to find any discussion about it online. Probably because there are things much more interesting to talk about in the game already. It's a bottom feeder asset in the topology gore pipeline. A low-level imp you promised yourself you wouldn't throw, but said his catchphrase too many times. For truly distressing topology, we're going to have to go for the bigger fish. Within the mid-level prey category, we find the majority of species within the shitty topology life cycle. The biology here is very diverse. Shitty geometry comes in all shapes and sizes, and like a wild eel, they may look scary, but won't crash your computer unless you spawn 2,000 of them. Final Fantasy Origins is apparently host to some of these specimens, such as a fur coat that halves your frame rate just by being visible. The polygon count on these models are sometimes outrageous, with common enemies in the hundreds of thousands, and some models reaching into the millions. And yes, these models are dense, but they are very high quality, they're just unoptimized. I highly doubt this coat is dropping the frame rate so substantially based solely on the sexual tension of the high polygon count on its own. It is likely some kind of shaders associated with the fur coat are the culprit. If you take a poorly optimized shader and apply it to an already high poly fur mesh, this could be the source of the problem. In Dark Souls 1 we see a similar issue with the Sif boss fight, where whenever he is on screen the game panics and dedicates 90% of its processing power to begging you to stop. The shell texturing for his fur being the likely culprit. Overall, these models are dense, but the quality of them at the very least justifies it to some extent. They're just in desperate need of someone to come in and create a level of detail version of them. I've never played a Crysis game, but from how players have described it, you must take out a loan of at least 20 grand to purchase a GPU strong enough, and even then, if you open a Chrome tab, you might as well have ran your graphics card under hot water and then installed it into a completely different computer. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that this image is supposedly real this time. A concrete divider from Crysis 2. Legend states that this is what they found inside the Ark of the Covenant. Now you might be thinking that a 3D artist arrived to work one day, harassed all the female staff, and proceeded to subdivide assets until the horse tranquilizers he took the day before finally wore off. But you'd be wrong, I haven't worked at a game studio yet. No, this is the work of something else. When Crysis 2 was released, the quality of the graphics were watered down to let lazy children who wouldn't get a job in the cobalt mines be able to afford to play their games on home consoles. Enraged, players flogged the devs in the streets like adulterers, and Crytek was forced to remedy the situation. To do this, they introduced dynamic tessellation to the game, a process where models are subdivided in real time based on multiple factors by an intern assigned personally to each player with a picture of their family on their desk to remind them what will happen if they are too slow and you notice a model is below the Crytek standard. It's a sort of cheat to get that three-dimensional look after the game was already released without it, but unlike normal mapping, this is actually altering the polygon count in real time. The amount of tessellation seems to depend on which DirectX you are using, and you can turn down the amount in the console, supposedly. So while this looks terrifying, the models didn't look like this originally. This makes the game kind of like a pufferfish. It puffs up to make itself look scary in the presence of more intimidating predators, which is why I'd put it squarely in the pufferfish category. These are not the apex predators you're looking for, however. For that, we're going to have to look at a set of models so dense, with seemingly no benefit, that they make your mom look tiny in comparison. Yes, I'm talking about the Garden of Banban games. When I released the video about the Yandere Simulator toothbrush, I got a lot of comments talking about the remote you seemingly hold through the entire game. And taking a look at this, I can see why it is such a point of contention. But what most comments didn't mention is that every model in the game seems to be fucked. Some of the character models in particular have gone past the point of even calling this topology. At this point, they are indistinguishable from real clay you could mold and shape. And this is because they are clearly the result of the most fun part of modeling characters, which is the sculpting. The creators of this game clearly enjoyed this part of the creative process, and it shows. The amount of characters has seemingly become exponential with each release. When sculpting in Blender, the polygon count can quickly skyrocket. It's very common to have models in the hundreds of thousands or even millions of polygons. There's nothing wrong with this. Models often look way more unique and interesting in this form than any other. It's my favorite part of making characters, and there are multiple routes a creator can take after sculpting to reduce the polygon counts to more socially acceptable limits. The proper thing to do is retopology, which I'll have a graphic on screen to describe what it's like to do retopology. The other is a quick cheat route, using a remesh modifier of some kind to reduce the polygon count through an algorithm. I personally have taken the cheap route and simply remeshed my characters countless times. It's not good to do and doesn't look as nice, but if you don't have the time or don't want to spend the time, it can work. My guess is the creators of Banban saw the models they spent a lot of time sculpting and didn't want to make them look worse by reducing the polygon count. But at this high density, they easily could have reduced a significant amount without harming the quality at all. I wanted to leave you with one last scarring experience before the end of the video, but all the examples I found online kept turning out to be hoaxes. It just goes to show if you want to do something right, you gotta do it yourself. What I'm about to show you is top secret, and please keep in mind this is one of the first things I ever designed, and it's never been released to the public. Just please be nice to me. This is from an early version of my first ever Unity project. It's the map file for the first level of the game. It was hard to find because somehow I managed to duplicate the assets folder twice. Giving the public access to making their own games, it's just a beautiful thing, really. Upon inspection, the map seems like a decent first level, but turning on wireframe we can see the hellscape that lay beneath the surface. Each room has an average of around 20,000 faces, except this one, which has 700,000. This must have been during another one of my development benders, because I genuinely have no memory of making this section. Like an eldritch horror, I guess my mind couldn't comprehend it. I must have just hit subdivide a few hundred times and then closed the file without looking at it. With all this intense attention to detail, you might be thinking to yourself, wow, this must translate beautifully into the game. And I'm here to tell you that yes, it does. If your name is Helen Keller. Rooms with 10,000 faces are basic square shapes, and all the work I put into pieces like this to stop the player from seeing outside of the cave doesn't even matter because the camera has admin privileges. I especially enjoy this piece for its seemingly non-Euclidean geometry. Truly inspiring. I'd like to believe there's a timeline out there where I finished and released this game, striking fear into the hearts and minds of artists worldwide. Sadly, I did not even know where the build button was yet in Unity, so we will never know what public reception would have been of the 5,000 polygon square room, but a man can dream. Because this is a project no one has ever seen before, I don't think it can really be fit into the ecosystem fairly. I kind of look at it like a prehistoric creature, one that would require a different kind of atmosphere to survive due to its sheer size. And in a way, that's kind of what everyone's unreleased projects are like. I'm sure a lot of people have things like this hiding on their desktop somewhere. I'm sure everyone has this somewhere. I really enjoy reading the comments some people leave describing their own prehistoric models. I especially like this video by the creator of Iron Lung, describing how difficult it has been managing his own project, Butcher's Creek. It definitely doesn't include anything as awful as my project has, but I still find a sick kind of comfort seeing a more skilled developer go through a similar kind of hell.
Because enemies are destructible objects, and because there's only like a few other destructible objects in this game, most of the destructible object code is then dealing with, well, what if this destructible object is an enemy? Because I suck at programming. And I've always sucked at programming, and everyone's like, no, it's fine, well, everyone does. But no, you don't understand.
So if you have some kind of topology skeletons hidden in your closet, or some other kind of game development mishaps, please don't leave me alone. Share it somewhere, anywhere. What you might think is the worst thing you've ever created in your life probably is, but it might make someone feel a little bit better about themselves today.